Okay, so in that last video we learned a lot about how to do basic, very simple things with the if statement. Now we're going to look at if-else blocks, which are going to be really important moving forward when you get into more advanced robotics and whatever else. So I've got a couple of examples. In fact, we'll start right off with the one that was where we left off last time. So let me switch this over so you can see the board. Okay, so here's our board, and we're running this example right here, or something very similar to it. So if I load it up, I'm running demo 1, which is right here. All we've done is we've set the value of the reading of the button to be a Boolean. So in other words, it's true or false. And if it's false, well, we're going to turn the light on. And if it's not false, if it's anything else, it's going to turn the light off. And sure enough, when I push the button, you can see that it turns on and off the red LED. So in the next example, though, I want to be able to toggle between a couple of LEDs. Okay? So I want the one LED to be on while the other LED is off. And you can see all I've done is add a second LED, okay, to each of these things. So for example, we were dealing with only the red. Now I've added the green. And it's super important to realize that I have in fact turned off the green when the red is on, and I have turned on the green when the red is off. So if I run demo 2, you'll see that it toggles between the two. So there's always going to be one LED on. It's going to be the red or the green, and it's going to be dependent on whether or not this button is depressed or not. Okay, so now we're running two different states of an LED with one button. So the next challenge is to be able to run, say, multiple states with one button. Okay, and that gets to be quite a bit more difficult. So let's look at demo 3. All right. So in the case of demo 3, what I've done is I've created another variable. It's actually called counter. Okay, now you don't see its creation here in this function. I've decided to make it a global variable, so it's actually going to appear up here. So I created my global variable called counter, and I've set it to 0, initialize it to 0, so it starts off at 0. And what I'm going to do in this example is this is going to be exactly the same. I'm just going to be looking for the state of the button. But if the button gets depressed, it's going to increment counter by 1. So counter plus plus means that if it's pushed, it's going to go from 0 to 1. If it's pushed again, it's going to go from 1 to 2. If it's pushed again, it's going to go 1 to 3. Pushed again, 1 to 4. So this is going to increment the counter up and up and up every time the button is pushed. So now what I've done is, instead of looking at value like we did here, where we made a decision just on the button state, all right, in this case I'm more interested in following what happens with our counter. So if counter is equal to, in other words, is equated to 0, then it's going to turn on the red LED. And it's going to turn off the green and the blue. If my counter is in fact equated to 1, okay, it's going to turn on the green and turn off the red and the blue. If my counter is equated to the value of 2, well, then it's going to turn on the blue and it's going to turn off the other two colors. Let's say, for example, I push it again, and now the value of the counter is in fact 3. Well, this condition is not true, this condition is not true, and this condition is not true. So therefore, it's going to go ahead and jump to this one by default. If it had been a 3 or 4 or anything, if I just held the button down, it's going to reset the value back to 0. Okay? So now notice, this is a single equal sign. This is a double equal sign. This is a double equal sign. So I want to know if it is 0, and in this particular case, I am telling it it is 0. So as I scroll through this, counter is going to go up, but if it ever exceeds the value of 2, it's going to reset it back to 0, and it's going to come back to the red LED. So let's go ahead and run demo 3. So I'm going to go ahead and comment out this one, and I'm going to uncomment that one. And when I run it, you can see that I can scroll through them by simply pushing the button, and I can scroll through 3 different colors. Okay? So once again, super important. I can't stress this enough. If you're dealing with an if, else, okay? And I said this in the last one, but you can more clearly see it right here. Here's an if, else block. What's going to happen in this particular scenario is that the first time this condition is true, so if it is a 1, for example, all right, it's going to execute this. But it will not even look here. It's going to exit the loop after it gets its first true instance. If it's a 0, it's going to go here. But then it's going to exit out all this other stuff. It's not even going to go there. And then it's going to go and come down to the end. If it's none of these, okay, it'll ultimately come here. So the first instance it's true, the first one, whatever it is the last instance it runs in an if, else block, and then it exits out. If nothing is true, it goes to the else. Okay? Now, I have a really long, no, it's not that long. It's a full, whatever it is, 15-minute video on if, and else. And it's actually quite well reviewed. I don't know how many views it has. It's in the thousands, if not tens of thousands. And I'm going to put it on the same page. If what I said does not make sense, it might be well worth it to watch the entire if, else video so you understand the complexities of this. There are going to be questions related to it on the worksheet, and you really need to know how this works. Okay? So that being said, I'm going to end this video, and then I'm going to give you 2 challenges. Okay, challenge 1 and bonus challenge that are going to be hardware based, and then of course there's going to be a worksheet related to the if, else. So that being said, I'm going to terminate this. You'll see me again with the challenges, and I'll be right back.